I just want to introduce Bill. First, he is a news anchor for Channel 10. He is hot off the campaign trail up in New Hampshire. And he's also suffering a little bit of a cold, so just, hopefully we'll spare his vocal cords a little bit today.
Yeah, all right.
And I'm going to turn things over to you.
Hello. So I was hoping you can start by just telling us a little bit about your career so far, like what you do at NBC Boston, how long you've been there, and also like where you've worked previously.
Okay, sure. So I'm the main anchor, the main evening anchor. Well, there are two of us. My co-anchor Shannon and I are the main anchors at NBC 10 Boston. So we anchor the 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and 11 p.m. news. So I've been in the business for 24 years, and this is the first time I don't have reporting as part of my schedule. So it's a full-time anchor job, but I obviously report and field anchor, on bigger stories. I spent most of my career split as an anchor and reporter. So I graduated Syracuse University, but I did not go to the School of Communications there. I studied speech communication, which was in visual performing arts, political science, and I minored in writing. And when I graduated, I'm from Newton. When I graduated, I came back home, and because I didn't go to Newhouse, I wasn't prepared with a resume reel to get to everybody. So I worked for free at Newton Cable, which is now New TV in Newton. It's a really impressive place. And I did a lot of odd jobs to make money for about 6 months while I built up my tape and sent it out. So I wound up sending it out to really small markets. If you're journalism majors, the way they do the markets in this country is like New York is one. I think Glendive, Montana is still 211, right? There's your market size. So I was sending tapes out to like the bottom 15 or 20 markets. And I got rejected from Oregon and Cheyenne, Wyoming, and all these places. And I said, oh, I'm in real trouble because I can't get in anywhere. I sent a tape out to Idaho Falls, Idaho, KIDK, Action News in Idaho Falls, which is in the southeastern portion of the state. It's actually in a really cool place if you're an outdoorsy person. It's about an hour and 45 minutes from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, about an hour and a half from Sun Valley. A few hours from Salt Lake, so it's a pretty cool location in the country and one of the most beautiful. At any rate, I didn't hear back from them. So I picked up the phone and I called the news director, and he said, I don't have your tape. And I said, but I sent it to you, 17, whatever the address was, and East 17th Street. And he said, all right, send me another one. So, at this time it was on VHS, and I made another tape and I sent it out to him, and I called him 2 days. I overnighted it with money I didn't have. And he said, I didn't get it. I said, I don't understand this. I'm sending it to the right address. He was intrigued by this whole thing. So he said, all right, I'm going to look for the tape. I'll give you a call back. Because it was Idaho Falls in 1996, anything that came into the mail room that said KIDK or a TV station, they mixed it up and they just sent it over to the radio station. They didn't even look at the address. They just said, oh, this is... So he drove over to the radio station in town and picked up my tape and brought it back and called me and said, I got your tape. And I also have like 10 candidates better than you, but I'll let you know on Thursday.
All the other missing tapes over there too.
Yeah. He said I'll let you know on Thursday. And I was, at the time, I was appraising real estate for my brother's company. I was working at a funeral home, bringing caskets in and out of funerals for a friend of the family, and I was bouncing at Zanzibar, which was down the alley right near Emerson. It's something else now, and Union Street in Newton Center. So I was doing all these things to make money, and I was...
What was Union Street, a restaurant?
Union Street's a bar restaurant, still there. Because I did that all through college. I bounced at a bar all through college. And so I get a call. I'm in an appraiser's office, and I get a call, and the news director called me and said, I'm sitting here with my general manager. And I was like, oh my God. He said, we have, as I said, candidates better than you, but my general manager says anybody who lives in Boston and wants to come out to Idaho as bad as you should have a chance to have a job.
Really? That's great.
That's what he said. And he said, we need you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So dropped everything and moved out to Idaho Falls, and that was how I began my career. And thank God, because it's the hardest thing to do is get into the business.
Right.
Once you're in it, you get better. So my mother said to me before I went out, just think of this, it's a 2-year contract, think of this as your master's degree. Because it is. I went out there, I shot, wrote, edited everything, drove the station car out to scenes. We had one live truck. I would drive that out to a scene and set up the camera, get the signal in, and then focus on a pole, pull back, and stand in front of the pole and do a live shot.
How many other reporters there?
5 or 6 to cover all of Eastern Idaho. Oh yeah, it was like college. We were all 21 years old. We'd finish the 11 o'clock news, go to someone's house and party, or go out to a bar, and it was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome. But it was Idaho Falls. I fell in love with the part of the country. I've taken my wife and my family back to Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. It's the most beautiful part of this country that I've seen. So I was out there for a year and 9 months, and this place in Kingston, New York. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hudson Valley, like Kingston, Rhinebeck. I got an offer there to come and anchor. I was like 22, 23 years old, 23, 24. And so I went because it brought me back to the East Coast. And I started anchoring the evening news and reporting as well. And the woman I was anchoring with, I started dating 6 months after I started anchoring with her. And we were there for about a year and a half and wanted to move on. So I sent a bunch of tapes out, and I got a bite from Miami. Now, this was a big jump because I was in market 168, came back to RNN, which was a regional news network. Like any of you from the New York tri-state area? It's like New York 1 in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's like NECN, New England Cable News. It covers a region. So that kind of wasn't a market. They considered themselves in the #1 DMA, but they weren't. So market 16 in Miami was huge. And they were interested in me as weekday anchor and reporter, and I said, will you look at my girlfriend's tape because we want to move together. They looked at her tape and said, yeah, she can freelance for us. So we moved down to Miami, worked for 2.5 years in Miami, got married while we were in Miami, and we were anchoring together down there too. And then my father, who had cancer 5 years prior to this, his cancer came back, and I wanted to move back to Boston. Not only was I wanted to broadcast here, but my dad was ill and had about a year to live. So we got jobs at WHDH, the NBC affiliate at the time, here in Boston. And we moved back up here after 2.5 years down there. So I'm 26, 27, and working in this, at the time it was the 5th market in the country. Now we're down to 9, population size. And my wife and I anchored here for 5 years. We had 2 kids during those 5 years, and both times my wife was in labor on the set and then went right to the hospital, because that's how they work you in this business. She'd actually gone out on maternity leave, and then they called her back, which is these days such a violation of whatever, but back then it was early 2000s. And can you please just come back? It's Marathon Monday. Can you please just come back? She's like 90 months pregnant, so uncomfortable, and she's like, sure. So she came back. I was out in the field. I was on Heartbreak Hill, and I get a call. We're taking Julie to the hospital. She's in labor. And I was like, you're going to be kidding me. Well, that's why she went out. So I went to the hospital. So both times she went to the hospital from the station.
Were you able to finish
I finished yes, both times I finished my live shot and then went to the hospital, because that's the business. I made both births, by the way. And so now our kids my daughter's going off to college next year, and my son's 14. But it's such a small business. So after 5 years in Boston, I got a job in New York City at WABC, which is Eyewitness News, which is, as they like to say, the #1 station in the country, because it is. It's the #1 station in the #1 market in the country, so therefore it's the #1 station in the country. And it was an incredible place to work. You're connected with the network. So we'd go, I wouldn't, but the meteorologist would go over and do hits for the network all the time. And by this time in the business, I was in my 30s by the time I got to New York, which was great. But at that point, I knew so many people. For instance, David Muir, who does the World News Tonight.
Yeah.
I didn't know him at Syracuse, but he worked at 5 here in Boston. So my wife and I reported with him.
Okay.
So I know David. Jeff Glor, who was doing the CBS Evening News for a while, I worked with at HDH. Now I know Lester Holt through it. So by the time you get to a certain place in the business, you know everybody.
Yeah.
So I was there for 8 years and covered everything. I'll mention some of the stories that I covered over my 24 years, but I was there for 8 years, and then I was anchoring weekend mornings and reporting during the weekday out of New Jersey, because that's where I lived. So Governor Chris Christie was governor at the time, so I was following him around. It was Sandy happened while I was there. I mean, it was some pretty intense stuff. And then Channel 5 here called me and said, we're expanding our 5 o'clock evening news. Would you like to come home and do that? It was really difficult to leave New York City. I'm from here, I love this place, but New York, in terms of news markets and just, you either love or hate New York, and I fell in love with it. It's just an incredible place. But I wanted to be on the evenings, and I was mourning most of my career, and I had a sleep disorder, and it was killing me, and once I heard one of my children said, "Is Grumpy Daddy coming home this weekend?" And my wife told me that, and I was like, okay, something needs to change. So I came home to WCVB, which is where I interned, and that was cool. But then the switch happened in town. I don't know if any of you are here for it, but the NBC where I worked the first time in Boston was losing its affiliation. Their affiliation agreement was up, and NBC owned NECN, Telemundo, NBC Sports Boston, so they figured, why don't we get all that money? And so they created their own owned and operated, and they tapped my boss in New York to come here and build it. So he came here, called me over at Channel 5 and said, want to be my main anchor?
That's awesome.
And I said, yes, I do. So that's my career in a nutshell. It's 24 years, and everything from when I went out to Idaho. The O.J. Simpson trial had ended years prior, and Mark Furman, I don't know if you know anything about the O.J. Simpson trial, but the police officer who was labeled racist, who kind of threw the case because they caught him on tape using the N-word 1 million times. It was a nightmare. He moved to Idaho right when I moved to Idaho, so I picked up the phone and got him on the line and said, can I do an interview with you? So I had an exclusive interview with him. The Aryan Nation was compounded in Hayden Lake, and I said to my general manager, my news director, hey, can I drive up there and see if I can get him? He goes, yeah. It's like 5 hours up to the Panhandle. I drove by myself with my 3/4-inch deck. None of these things. Had a cable to the deck. You put your tape in it. Knocked on the door of the Aryan Nation compound, their flag flying and everything, and got a great interview with Richard Butler, who was head of the Aryan Nation at the time. Those were things I did out in Idaho. When I got down to Miami, Elian Gonzalez, I don't know if you know that case, you guys are all way younger than that, but he floated over here from Cuba on a raft with his mother, trying to escape Cuba. His mother died on the trip over. He lived, he had family in Miami, and they did not want to give him back to his father in Cuba because they hated Castro. And that was a crazy battle. World media came down. Finally, Janet Reno, who was Attorney General at the time, sent the feds in, and we were there that night. So the shot of them coming out with him was our camera. Wow. Our cameraman knew that something might go wrong, so he had extra cables set up ready. When the feds came in to take the kid, I mean, when feds come in, all you gotta do is put your hands up, because they don't care, woman, child, whatever. They punched a woman. This Cuban woman, old Cuban woman, grabbed one of the federal officers' arms, and he turned around and just knocked her out. And the first thing they did is gas the media. They sprayed us with pepper spray. Wow. And then they went in, long guns, took the kid, took off. Sent him back to Cuba, which you can debate whether it's right or wrong, but in this country, if you have a father who wants you and your mother dies, you go to your father. You don't go to some relatives in another country who have a political... Yeah. So we weren't allowed to talk about this there were fistfights in news stations, because all of the people I worked with in Miami were Cuban American. 800,000 Cuban Americans at the time in '99 when I worked in Miami. So it was crazy. That was nuts. So Elian Gonzalez, Miami is where I mean, I covered, Miami's the craziest news place in the world. Every day we woke up and decided which 10 murders which was more sensational than the other. There were riots because of Elian Gonzalez, and my wife called me from on top of a live truck that the rioters were shaking, and she's like, I can't get off, my photographer abandoned me.
Nice photographer.
Yeah, he and I had issues. I had a gun pointed at me in Miami. My wife had a gun pointed at her in Miami. We came back to Boston, and then in Boston, the news wasn't so crazy those 5 years I was in Boston. Oh, my God, I'm such an idiot. I was in Boston for 9/11, and because the planes left from Logan, we were 12 hours on, 12 hours off at Logan. There were 780 security badges missing at the time. That's why they chose Logan, because it was so easy to get a hold of planes. And my wife was pregnant at the time, so she was doing live shots and throwing up in between live shots because she had morning sickness. And my dad passed away when I was in Boston 2 months after 9/11. So when I look back on it, I kind of feel like I lost him during 9/11. He was 62, my best friend in the world. And one of his best friends died on Flight 11, Richard Ross. And when the manifest came out, he was sitting next to Muhammad Atta, who was one of the hijackers on Flight 11. He was like the lead hijacker. So that was Boston. Then I went to New York and covered everything from Sandy. While I was in Boston, I went and covered Katrina. I was down there for a week, sleeping in my car and in shelters. Had a gun pointed at me in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, when I went down there for Katrina. Sandy happened on my watch in New York. Then a year after Sandy, you remember the rest of the boardwalk burned down? I don't know if you remember that. That was the last story I covered before I came home. Sully's plane landing on the Hudson, I was there that day and covered that. There are things I'm forgetting, but...
What about the marathon bombing?
I was in New York, and I got a call, and they said, a bomb just went off in your town, you got to go home. Okay. They sent me back here, and I covered the marathon bombing. Did live hits for Regis and Kelly that morning. That was weird. It's the only time in my life I ever did a live hit and got an ovation by an audience. Do you know that usually you toss back to your anchors? I finished, and their whole live audience was like clapping in my ear. It was so weird because that's what Kelly thanked me and said, Kelly and Regis is done out of, or Michael now, not Michael, Ryan Seacrest. It's done out of the WABC building. It's owned by WABC. It's their station. Yeah. So she was an employee of the same place I was an employee. I did makeup in the same room, so I got to know her. And she said, Phil, I know your son's the same age as Richard Martin. I know this is tough for you. Thank you very much. And the whole audience, I'm listening in my ear, them clapping. It was so surreal because everything was still locked down. Bags were all over the ground behind me, and there's an audience clapping about a live show. There's some weird things that happened in my career. That was one of them. So that's been the totality of my career, 24 years into it, which goes by in an instant. Yeah. I have a daughter going off to college next year. Yeah. I know I don't look like it. You don't have to say that. But that's it. I can, any questions you have about this business, specific stories I covered, or how it was to cover certain stories, I love answering them. And if you have specific stories about journalism, I can help you out with that too.
I'm curious, since you didn't have that journalism background in college, why you decided to then switch over into that once you left?
Okay. Good question. So I thought I wanted to be an English teacher. I loved writing. I loved teaching. I taught tennis all throughout high school, taught swimming. I loved teaching, and I loved writing. So I thought, why not just teach writing? And so I went to school for, I was in visual performing arts at Syracuse. Junior year, I was watching the evening news, and I thought to myself, wow, I wonder how they put this together. Because I was listening to some of the writing, the reporters, and I was like, this is cool. So I went to the local student-run TV station at Syracuse, which is part of Newhouse, and said, I'm not a Newhouse, but can I do some stuff? And they were not thrilled about that, because Newhouse is very selective, and they just want you to be in Newhouse. And so I wasn't, but they did let me do a little live reporting they sit me in the newsroom, I'd rewrite copy from the AP, and I have like a walkie-talkie right here, and they'd go, "Go!" and you'd hear "go" on TV, and then I'd do a little live report. The minute I did it, I was hooked. I rewrote the copy in my voice, and I did it live, presented it live. And so junior year, I wanted to do that. I had a meeting with the dean of Newhouse. I wanted to transfer in. My first semester, a couple of you are first year, right? I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but it's much easier to work off of a good GPA than up, try to build up. My first semester freshman year, I didn't do very well because I got to this campus and it was like nuts, and we partied all the time. And so by the time I got to my junior year, I had a 2.95, which is respectable but not great. They want a 3.25 to transfer into Newhouse. So I went, I had a meeting with the dean, and I said, look, if I don't get dean's list every single semester, kick me out. But this is what I want to do. I'm focused. I get great grades when I know what I want to do. And she said, I'm sure you're going to do really well, but it's a 3.25. It's very competitive. Best of luck. And so I told her, I appreciate that, but when I come back to speak at Syracuse, I'm not going to let Newhouse faculty in to hear the speech. And she laughed, and we shook hands, and that was it. And so I figured out another way. I minored in writing, and I majored in speech communication, which was in visual performing arts. And that was everything from body language to how to read body language, how to mirror someone's body language, interpersonal communication, literally everything that I needed to be a good reporter. I didn't have the journalism background, but to be honest, it's nice, but you learn on the job. You learn on the job. And there was one thing that was very clear to me. My first producer in Idaho went to Newhouse. I didn't know him from Syracuse because it's a pretty relatively big school. But one night, because I anchored the morning show, my co-anchor and I, it was just the three of us, and our producer were sitting there trying to figure out what we're going to lead with. We're having a legitimate conversation about what we're going to lead with. We are at an CBS-affiliated station, so we're now in the real world. My co-anchor and I agreed we should lead with one thing. The producer said we should lead with the other. He said, hang on, give me a second. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. He picks up the phone, dials somebody. My co-anchor and I are looking at each other like, what is he doing? Who's he waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning? He woke up a professor from Newhouse to ask the professor what he thought we should lead with. And he got off the phone. I'll never forget it. His name was Adam. He got off the phone and he said, well, my professor agrees with me. And I'll never forget that moment, because education is so important. And if I could have been in Newhouse, it would have been great. But my co-anchor and I were right. She had gone to a journalism school too, but it doesn't matter. Like, if two people, it just said to me, like, sometimes you can rely too much on books and not about what you're seeing in front of you. That would be like a really big piece of advice for you. When you leave school, and if any of you are reporting or anchoring or writing or doing anything in the business, for sure, rely on what you've learned in school, but realize that was school, this is this. Use your gut, which was built in school, and go with your gut. Adam wound up leaving there and going to a cable outlet in Tallahassee, and then left the business. And this was a kid who went to the almighty Newhouse School of Broadcasting and woke up a professor. But see, the difference is we were going to go with our gut. We were going to go with what this is happening right now. He relied on so.
Right. Which lead did you end up using?
We wound up leading with what my co-anchor and I wanted to lead with, because at that point, when you're 21 years old, 2 outweigh the 1, and he wasn't our boss. 5 lose to 1 if it's your boss. That just happened recently. All of us thought we should lead with something else, and we wound up leading with another thing. But at that point, if you're paying, you're signing my paychecks and you're telling me what to do, I kind of have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Questions?
Sorry. Have you ever thought, like, have you ever had this thought that I should quit, especially after some of the things you've seen or experienced? Because when you said you've had a gun pointed at you, I mean, that's not something, I mean, right now, I guess you've internalized it, so you're fine with it at this stage in life, but at that stage in life, were you ever like, I know you love your job, that's probably why you still do it, but.
Well, and a false sense of security at times. It's a great question you have, and when I was in New Hampshire, there's a young woman who graduated Emerson. She's probably just a couple of years older than you guys, and she's writing for us. And they had her up there as a production assistant just to help the anchor team out with the scripts and everything. And a wonderful young woman, and we're staying at the same hotel. I was having breakfast. She came in, and obviously we're not going to sit at separate tables, you know. So I said, "Come on over." She sat. We had a long conversation, and she lived a town over from Newtown, Connecticut. And she was just getting, she was in broadcast journalism at Emerson, and she's doing a master's. And when that happened, and she was talking to me about how it affected her. And it's a great question you have, because I don't know if it would have changed anything in my life. I think I would have gone into the same business and done what I did. But I was not prepared for the things that I have seen, heard, experienced. And unlike police officers, firefighters, emergency responders, we are not mandated to speak to a therapist. No one at any station up until recently, now that the sort of the culture of mental health has changed, has anybody even offered it to me. So I've been to several open casket funerals of children who, before they were in the casket, were out on the street, you know, or in a house dead, and I saw them. The gun pointed at my head really rattled me. I've seen, and not to get, you know, but this is what you should hear. I mean, I've seen body pieces all over the road, a guy separated from his head. I got to a murder scene before the police got there because I was a block away interviewing a family whose daughter got hit by a car and killed. So I'm holding the father's hand, the mother's curled up in a ball screaming, and I'm interviewing them. And then my Nextel goes off. Hey, shots fired literally 2 blocks away. Can you go check it out? Ran across the street, can't find anything. See some smoke from behind bushes, walk around, there's a guy, 8 bullet holes in his chest, lying there, eyes open, dead. Police haven't gotten there. I could go on and on from the gun. The gunshots had just, it settles in the air. It was Miami. It was very humid, and it just, I could go on and on and on and on and on. And so not until, it's funny because this young woman and I were talking, not until Newtown, because I was working in New York and they sent me. So I was there and I saw the parents and the kids coming out, and I had a son that age. My son was in 1st grade at that time. And everything changed for me when I had children. When I didn't have children, I could put these things in a box. Yeah, these are horrible things that happen, but you know, you're in the all right, what do I need to do? I'm live at 4, 5, and 6. I need a VOSOT, a VO, a package, and you're doing your things, and you're just kind of like police officers, how they can laugh. They get knocked sometimes because you see them talking or eating at a scene where there's a body on the ground. Well, they have to distance themselves from it and put it in a box, or it will eat you up. And years ago, the stereotypes, if you like watch Ron Burgundy, you watch the Anchorman, the stereotypes of this business, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of divorce. That was for a reason. Because the stuff, it's same thing as police, firefighters, EMTs. Same thing, because you see this stuff, you internalize it, then you go home to this normal, beautiful life, your wonderful wife, your 2 kids, and it doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. When I got back from Katrina, I literally walked around in a daze for a week. Almost got hit by a car in Government Center because I was like a zombie. I wasn't paying attention. Because for a week, there was nothing. No power. Bodies were being... it was insane. And then you come back and you have your nice house that you're living in and your 2 beautiful kids who are clueless to what you just saw. it's difficult. So after Newtown, I actively sought out someone to talk to. And I've gone back a couple times since, and now so many people I know in the business have done that. And I would just suggest, if you're going to go into the business, keep that in mind, because the first time you're at a scene and there's not many people see dead people. It's like that Sixth Sense movie, like I see dead people. Not many people, it's not a normal thing in your daily life to see a person who has just been run over by a car or shot themselves in the head, or worse, people have been shot and killed. And it's not a normal thing, and it does mess with your head. And I know people who have burned out. I've never thought of quitting because of that, but I definitely went and sought someone to talk to. And I remember this guy looked at me and goes, "How long you been in the business?" And I said something like, I don't know, 18 years or something. He said, "You've never talked to anybody about anything you've seen?" I said, "Well, no, I talked to my wife because she's in the business with me. We see the same kind of things." He's like, "Not the same thing." Thanks for coming, because it's going to make you a better person and it'll make everybody around you better. And, so yeah, there's no stigma really left on mental health. In my opinion, it is the single biggest problem we have in this country. It is bigger than, well, maybe climate change, but it's bigger than guns. It's bigger than everything, because mental health, almost every crime I cover, almost every horrible thing I've seen, mental health is at the root of it. And so the fact that everybody's kind of getting straight with mental health, and you need someone to talk to, go talk to somebody. You'll be better off for it. And so a lot of people in my business are now doing that. It's a really, really, really good question, because it took me more than a dozen years to figure out that I might need to do that. And in those dozen years, I saw a lot of stuff that I'm sure damaged me in ways that made me more cynical, things like that. But it can be bad. It can be bad.
I wanted to ask, the professional level of it, when you are in situations like this and you have to do a live reporting or something, can you tell us some tips, or how to shoot something, or when you're on live TV, how to get the shots then in a situation for somebody's new?
For somebody's new? For just any situation, like covering any story?
No, but in situations like those, if you're new to that kind of situation, you're saying to cover a situation
big
like that.
tragedies.
Like a big thing where you're being physically affected because you're human, and everybody's being affected. I go back to those police officers who could be eating a sandwich, with a triple murder, at a triple murder scene. It's, I remember at Newtown. Sometimes you have to take a moment, whether it's away from your crew, or hey, I gotta run to the restroom. You take a moment. There's no crying in baseball. There, a couple of times in my career, I've had to just stop and emote. And I wouldn't.
On the air or off the air?
No, I've been emotional on the air, but I not cried. My cousin works for CNN. She's been Sanjay Gupta's number 2 for 25 plus years. Her name is Elizabeth Cohen, and she does medical reporting. But during 9/11, they needed bodies, and they sent her to the armory during 9/11. Before people knew the extent of the tragedy, they were posting pictures of their loved ones on walls at the armory, and they were, if you see this person, and Elizabeth was asked to go there and report live for CNN, and I believe she was the first person to cry on television because of the magnitude of the tragedy, and it was real. And I mean, she was so over. She has 4 kids. She was overcome with emotion, and I get it. You just have to be, if you are the kind of person who can feel that emotion, understand what's happening to you, and but I have a job to do, and you're on deadline all the time. You work on a deadline, so take time, deal with it, and just go, all right, I got to get this done. And usually it's at the end of the day where it hits you. And that's why, as I said before, like back in the day, everybody jokes about, the 70s and the 80s with journalists, and they would go and drink in between dinner, and they'd come back, and they couldn't stay married, but it's those kind of things that affect you, so you have to deal with it. And you just have to be, I know it's not a great answer. It's just I'm thinking back to all the scenes that I've been on, whether it was 9/11 or Sandy or Katrina or Newtown, or covering Parkland, whatever it was, you just kind of have to go, this is reality. This is what's happening. I have two choices. I can either curl up in my bed and cry about it, which, believe me, I've wanted to do several times, or I can do my job, which is really difficult, and get through it and deal with it at the end of the day. And that's what you do. I know it's not a great answer, but I know I don't know what kind of person you are. I don't know if you'll be able to do that. I know people who can't do that and who've gotten out of the business. It doesn't say anything about you. This business is not for everyone. It's just like being a police officer, firefighter, EMT. It's not for everyone. Firefighters. Everyone you know would run into a building and risk their own life to save other people, and it is not what we do. I'm not comparing, I'm just saying this business isn't for everybody for the reason you asked. That business isn't for everybody because not everybody is that brave.
I just want to ask about the pressure of deadlines, because I was at the Globe for 26 years, and we have deadlines, file at 8, but if it's 10 after, or maybe 8:45, okay, but with you guys, I was watching and think, okay, 6:01, you better have something, whatever it is.
Yeah, I was going to say 10 after, that's funny.
Yeah.
So deadlines in our business have changed a little bit because we've gone automated. There are less people in the control room, and a computer does a lot of it. So because of that, they want to do your mic check 15 minutes before, so you need to be standing in place on your live shot 15 minutes before you go live. So now, your package needs to be in 30 minutes before air. We used to be able to do right up to air, and they'd run the tape just like in the movies and slam it into the deck, and we made it. That's not the way we roll anymore. Like, everything's digital, so it makes it a little quicker. Yeah. You upload through your computer, and you shoot on little discs, not big tapes. But usually your package needs to be in at least by the time you jump in front of the camera, which should be 15 minutes before. There are breaking news situations where it's 5 minutes before where you can really get up to the wire, but it's gotta upload into the system. And if there's any kind of computer problem or signal problem, you run the risk of missing slot. And I think in 24 years I missed slot once because I was driving to a scene in a blizzard and I just couldn't get there. So really, it wasn't my fault. Yeah. But you got to make air, no matter what. There are many times you have to change. And guys, I know you wanted a package. It's not going to make it. I'm sending you a VOSOT. Do you guys know the terms?
No.
Okay, so a package would be a full story that the reporter puts together with track and a soundbite from you and more track and some pictures and natural sound from the scene. Sometimes that's a minute and 10 seconds, and you can't put it together. So you'd call and say, "Listen, I've got the guy who saw the shooter run from the scene. I'm just going to cut a soundbite from him, and I'll wrap around it live. That's all I have time for." Yeah. But as a reporter, you have to know your limitations. You run the risk of missing deadline when you don't know who the photographer is you're working with, what their capabilities are, how fast they can move, how fast you can move. If there's no self-awareness, you miss slot. Yeah. Our deadlines are our deadlines. They are by the second. When the show starts live, it started and it's rolling. Yeah. And if you're not going to be a part of it, you're not going to be a part of it. There are people who miss slot more than others, and those people wind up not working for your station. Yeah. Because you can't have that. It screws the whole show up. Yeah. Remember being a producer, producing a whole show? You lose your live first lead story while all the other stations in the market have it, but your lead story missed because of something that happened. 9 times out of 10, it's not human error, it's something that's gone wrong with it, but it's bad, because then it snowballs. Because then you go, all right, I got to kill that. Guys, we're going to the next thing. Then if the prompter doesn't go, the anchors don't have prompter, it's a snowball effect that can really make a show look bad. Yeah. Got to be in place, got to hit your deadline.
What does your day-to-day look like now?
Now it's different than when I reported. So now I work basically 3 to midnight. So I'll come in probably 2:45, see if I can get a parking space in the garage. And then I get in, and a lot of the times I anchor the 5, 6, and 11. A lot of times they want me in the 4. Hey, we've written a VOSOT for you, or we've written a package for you. They're still debating over impeachment. We want to go live to the Senate floor, but we want you to do it from the newsroom. So I'll get in, I'll throw on some makeup, look in the thing, and jump right into the 4. Or if I don't have the 4, I get the luxury of for an hour reading the 5 and 6 o'clock newscasts and rewriting some things. Any decent anchor will get into every script they're about to read and rewrite it. Or not rewrite it, but put it in the way I speak. Because we have a lot of writers and producers that write great scripts, but it's not the way I speak. And to be effective anchor is very different than being effective reporter. When you're a reporter, everything's coming out of your head, and so it's yours. When you're at the desk, you're reading, and the best way not to look like you're reading is to really know the content. So I won't change facts because the people who've written it have done the research, they know the facts, but I just change the way it's written. Then once the 4 starts, it's 4, 4:30, 5, 5:30, 6, 7. And so boom, you're on for that amount of time. And even if you're not on, you're reading the next show, you're perhaps in the 5:30, which you're not, they call it an off anchor hit. You're doing a big story in another show that your station has. And then after 6:30, I go out and grab some dinner, come back, have discussions about what we're doing for the 11, and then jump into the 11, and really we have our hands on the 11 really well because it's just a half hour and you have a couple of hours to really craft it. So the 11's sort of my favorite because it's not crazy, less people in the newsroom, and we can really focus on the content and what we're doing. And then 11:30 finishes up, we do a little post-mortem on the show, and I drive home. When I was reporting, it was very different. Call in the morning, all right, you got to go here. I drive my car, meet the crew, go do the story, whoever it was, then have to drive back to your car, then have to drive back home, and a whole different thing. But I've done both my whole career. They're 2 different things. I'm very fortunate that my whole career I was split, anchor reporter at almost every job, because some of your best anchors just don't work as reporters because they're good news readers, but they're not. I think the best anchors were the best reporters. Because what we're doing is, over the years, my bio and social media has changed. It was reporter, anchor, but now I call myself a storyteller. Because that's what it is. I could talk to you right now about something that happened in your life and write a story on it pretty quickly. Because that's the job. But at the end of the day, whether you're an anchor or a reporter or a writer or producer or a manager, we're all storytellers. And that's what the business is about. We're supposed to tell stories. And we're supposed to tell them in non-biased and compelling ways.
Questions?
In terms of like being a camera person or a video reporter, do you think there needs to be sort of a focus on fitness? And I don't just mean physical fitness, like that could be one part of it, but do you need to have a good sleep cycle, or do you feel, are video reporters still people who are like getting by on coffee and just 4 hours of sleep, or has it sort of evolved where you can sort of manage your life?
Good question. So in a perfect world, you function better. Everybody does. Professors, camera people, on-air people, we all function better with sleep. I have a horrible relationship with sleep, and it's because of the business. Short answer to your question, we're all living on coffee, candy, and crappy food. Long answer, I'm as fit as I am because I go to the gym 6 days a week, do a ton of cardio, ton of weights, run Spartans for my own sanity. And to keep looking like I want to look, because if I just ate candy and chicken parmesan all the time, which I do, and didn't work out, I wouldn't look like I look, and unfortunately in my end of the business, look is part of it. So because I was doing mornings and nights and mornings and nights and split shifts and mornings and nights and split shifts, I got something called shift worker sleep disorder, which again is what police, firefighters, and EMTs get. When you're not working the same shift and you can't go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, your circadian rhythm isn't right. That's why babies don't have a circadian rhythm when you bring them home. You have to build it by putting them to sleep at the same time, waking them up at the same time, and then their body gets to know, oh, this is about the time where I should fall asleep. The light's getting darker, the melatonin, all this stuff. I didn't have it. So I worked for close to 18 years of my life on 4 hours of sleep. So I was like almost like a functioning alcoholic, except I was a functioning sleep-deprived human being, which is very dangerous. There were times where I was on my way into where I fell asleep in the Lincoln Tunnel driving, and a rumble strip woke me up. I slept past an exit one time in a car. Like, it's not a good deal. So yeah, the more you can sleep, the more you can keep your schedule the same. The more you can sleep, the more you can exercise, the better you'll be, especially as a cameraman, because I offer to carry everything with photographers, but some reporters don't. And so you got a photographer with a camera, a tripod, a backpack full of stuff. That's a lot of stuff, and sometimes you're hiking half a mile to where you got to go. If the police block a scene off, you park 5 blocks away from a scene, and you've got to hoof it, like run, because things are happening that you need to videotape. Or shoot, I should say. And so yeah, physical fitness is important in the business all across it. On your end of the business, if a photojournalist is what you want to be, because maybe you'll get there, maybe because you're in better shape, you'll get there 30 seconds faster than another photographer who's not in shape and had to walk, but that 30 seconds can be the money shot. That 30 seconds can be everything. It can be before they close the back of the ambulance. It can be while they're walking the guy out in cuffs. So yeah, physical fitness could get you the money shot that makes you a better photographer than everybody else that day. Physical fitness for me keeps me sane and looking the way I need to look. It doesn't make me get to the studio faster anymore.
Quick question. This is just sort of about the expansion of the news business. So, I'm 65. So back in the day, it was sort of like this, for local anyways, it was the 6 p.m. and the 11 o'clock. Now it's the 5 to 6. Some stations, they have the 8, the 9, and everything else. And it just seems like, which is great for me because I love news. I can basically turn it on anytime I want, not to mention CNN and Fox or whatever. But locally, it just seems there's so many more broadcasts than there used to be.
For a couple of reasons. Some of them are good, some of them are not good. You work way harder in this business than you did back in the day. Even when I interned at Channel 5 in 95, I interned for guys like Ron Golubin and Jorge Quiroga, who I wound up actually working with. Jorge, Ron retired, but these guys who I grew up watching, Chet and Natalie, they would do the 6 and 11. They'd go home in between, see their kids or whatever. Reporters would have 2-hour dinners, and it was a deal. Like, it was awesome. Now, with all of the programs you're talking about, even just on individual stations, if you watch Channel 7 here in town, they're independent now, but they 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. What? And we have the majors, the network affiliated stations in this market do 4, 4:30, 5, 5:30, 6, 7. Over at CBS, they're doing 8 o'clock news on their other channel. We're doing it 10 o'clock. You're asked, the demand is much more these days. You're asked to do much more. It also means, the good thing is your curve in getting better happens quicker. So you'll get to a bigger market quicker because you'll be better at it. You're not doing 1 story a day. You're doing 4 stories a day. You're rewriting things. Your deadlines are quicker. So that's why kids are younger and younger at bigger and bigger markets. Also, they're paying less, like everything else. They're paying, so, and it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is today. There's news everywhere, and cable didn't help because cable was 24 hours, and it forced local to add more. And when this is the business aspect of it, it's easier to add an hour of news, cheaper to add an hour of news because you're already paying your people to be in the building. So just go do an hour of news, doesn't cost anybody anything. But if you were to buy 2 syndicated shows to put in that hour, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So some of it is money.
Last question, anybody?
Nothing about craziest story or
What would you say has been like the highlight of your expansive career?
highlight. There are a bunch of highlights, and for different reasons. So my passion outside of journalism is music. And over the years, I have kind of pushed that on my stations. So if there's been something that I really wanted to cover music-wise, they would let me do it. They kind of let you do passion projects if there's time. And so one of the highlights of my career was in New York. I got to interview all the living members of Led Zeppelin, and John Bonham's son, Jason. They had the O2 Arena shows they did in 2007. They got back together with Jason Bonham's son. They only did 2 shows, and they were releasing the DVD of that. And they had a red carpet event. And I said to my boss at the time, he and I are huge Bruce Springsteen fans. I've seen Bruce 67 times. He's seen him well over 100 times. So he understood my love for music. So he said, fine, take a camera and go and put it together for your weekend morning show. Like, you're not going to do it on... So I went with a camera and I sit on the red carpet. And I first interviewed John Paul Jones, which was cool. But then I started playing guitar because I loved Led Zeppelin. So when Jimmy Page came over to me and they introduced him, they said, this is Phil from ABC. And he went, oh, hello, Phil from ABC. And I almost didn't know what to say. I mean, I've interviewed presidents. I got to interview the Dalai Lama. I'm very into Buddhism, and I got to interview the Dalai Lama, which was insane. Every senator, congressperson, but some of the coolest things I've done in my career. So Led Zeppelin was amazing. Robert Plant was incredible, and a stupid kid with a broken iPhone next to me ruined that interview. If you don't know, like, even if it's music and you don't know what you're talking about, the one thing you don't ask Robert Plant, if you know anything about Led Zeppelin, is when are you guys getting back together? You'd make so much money. Like, they stopped playing when John Bonham died in the 80s, some iterations here and there. This kid, I don't even know if he knew who Robert Plant was. He was probably 20, and he was like, hey, so when are you guys gonna get back together? I got one question into Robert Plant. He answered it. It was about the music and how it's probably the best they've ever sounded because of the technology. It was a great answer, and this kid asked him, when are you gonna get together? And Robert Plant, who can be very ornery, looked at him and went like this, turned around and walked away from us. And so on my camera, you can hear me going, are you kidding me? And I lay into this kid, he's like, what? I'm like, seriously, you don't do any research? It's the one thing you don't ask this guy. So that was awesome. On that red carpet, again, a lot of the kids were younger than me, so they didn't recognize Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac, who was walking down the red carpet. I'll just tell you this quickly, because this was super cool too. Stevie Nicks is walking down and I go, hey, Stevie. And she's wearing big, dark sunglasses, as you see her most of the time. I was like, come on over here. And she's like, no, it's not about me tonight. I'm like, no, come on over here. So she comes over. And my photographer's standing here, and he's super into music too. I took a guy who would love doing this, and I put the microphone out, and I said, Stevie, this is amazing. You're walking the carpet at a Led Zeppelin event. I feel like it's 19 whatever. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, your photographer doesn't know. And I said, no, what? And she goes, you don't shoot me from this side. And I said, oh, okay. And he immediately ran around to the other side of me, and you get to...
Was she serious?
Dead. And the part of this business that makes you a good reporter is no. I could see through the glasses she was dead serious. And what I would say if you're getting into this business is the hardest thing to do is be yourself. Everybody tells you just be yourself. But when you get into the business, you're self-confident, you're self-conscious because you're young, so you pretend to be these older guys you see on TV. Just be yourself. And for me, I love talking to people. I could sit here and talk to you guys for another 2 hours about what I do because I love it, or about anything. So you also got to figure out what makes people tick. When I'm talking to you, if I had an hour-long conversation and you and I were going back and forth, I would know how to talk to you. I would figure out how to talk to you. I'm talking to Stevie Nicks. I've read things about her. She says, don't shoot me from this side. Obviously, she has the thing, so my photographer runs right around, but I'm not going to just go on with the interview. So I say to her, And I have this on camera. I say, let me just ask you a question. I'm sorry, what's wrong with that side? And she said, everybody knows it's my bad side. And I looked at her, and she's an aging woman in the music industry, which is not an easy thing to be. And she's obviously self-conscious. And so she takes her glasses off, and she looks at me, and I said, I got to be honest with you. I'm looking at both sides, and they both look amazing. And she smiled and held her hand out to me with this huge ring on it, like the Pope's ring. Held her hand out to me, and I grabbed her hand, and I kissed it, and we had the most incredible interview. And all because I said, I'm looking at both sides, and I don't see a problem. They both look the same to me, and they both look great. Like, and not in a creepy way, not in like an inappropriate way. She's telling me she has one bad side. I'm looking at him going, you look symmetrical, you look fine. And then we had the greatest interview. And that, if I can impress that upon you, like, you've got to go into this. If I went into it like, so, blah, 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 she would have been like, okay, blah, 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 and that would have been the end of it. But because I made a human connection with her, the interview was better. So highlights of my career, Ricky Martin back in the day in Miami, interviewing him after Livin' La Vida Loca came out with the leather pants. There are really cool things that I've done. But other things, the Dalai Lama, getting, unfortunately, highlights of my career are getting to be at those big, horrible scenes, cover it appropriately with empathy so that I've done it right. I know a lot of people in the business who don't really have that kind of empathy, and I consider it a service to extend that empathy to people who are in crisis. 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with someone who is in a crisis. I can't tell you how many times I've knocked on a door, they've opened it up, and I have said, if I was you, I would want to hit me. And I get that. If you want me to go away, I'll go away. But my boss asked me to come here to see if I could talk to you. And that is one of the best ways to approach people. And still, someone swung at me, someone threatened to kill me. You get someone cocked a shotgun on the other side of the thing, and we jumped back and ran. But if you approach it as a human, 7 times out of 10 people will see you as a human. I will say this, and I know you guys, I don't want to keep you, I know you have other things to do, but I will say this. Over the last 3 years, and my political, no one knows, I'm a registered unenrolled in Massachusetts. It's an independent. Only my close friends know where I fall politically. And in truth, and I can tell you, I voted for both Republicans and Democrats. I'm a real independent. But I can tell you, when I talk about this president, I don't talk about his policies. Some of them I think are good, some of them I think are bad. My problem with this president is the way he has assaulted my industry. And I understand his description of fake news, what's the word I'm looking for? Definition of fake news is any news he doesn't like. But because he is so powerful and speaks to so many people through social media, our business has changed. My co-anchor was down on the Cape covering a tornado that hit recently. She's standing on Route 6 in the Cape covering a news story. And someone drives up behind her and screams, F you, fake media, and threw something out of the car. I'm gonna tell you, all of our crews get that all the time out in the field now. In Massachusetts. Imagine what you get down south or in the Midwest. Our business has changed. We are not looked upon. When I started this business, it was like, oh my God, the media's here. Now, a lot of the time, it's like, screw you right off the bat. I hate you. You're here to do no good. And so now you're battling that too. So I would just let you know that that's happening. I personally think it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse over this next year if President Trump wins re-election. I think that we'll see some violence against journalists, and not just from the right against journalists. I think we'll see violence from the left against right-wing politicians. You remember the baseball field shooting? Do you guys remember that when the Congress people were shot? The guy was a Bernie Sanders supporter who picked up that rifle and shot Steve Scalise. It's on both sides, and it's getting worse. And in the media, and in the middle is caught the media, because you're trying to cover it, and hopefully at the local level, you're trying to cover it right down the line. Only time I ever speak out about the president is when he assaults my industry. And I had a really interesting conversation with someone on Twitter at the primary. We tweeted something out, and some guy tweeted back, "All you talk about is you're not going to show his long lines and this and that and this and that," just talking points that the president repeats. And I wrote back to him, I usually don't deal with like Twitter war with someone who hates the media, but I was like, hey, listen, go to NBC10Boston.com, look at my Twitter feed. Right now, if you turn on television, we have a reporter inside his rally showing the 15,000 people are there. We showed people who slept out overnight. We talked about him winning the primary. Don't tell me we are not going to show that. Don't just repeat a talking point. Don't just, and my problem with anybody today, even those on the left, and I talked to many people in my family and otherwise on the left, who was like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, you're not educated about that. Read about it, learn about it, and then come and talk to me. Don't just repeat talking points you hear on MSNBC or Fox. All day long, I listen to in my car, on satellite, and watch at the station, Fox and CNN side by side. And I know what everybody's saying. And I know when you tell me something, it's a talking point and you haven't researched it, because that's not the truth. And the truth still matters. I don't care that everybody is talking about, this is what I believe, so this is what I believe. That's where we're at now. What you believe is your truth. No. What you believe is your belief. The truth is still the truth. Facts are still the facts, whether you don't like the facts, or you don't like the facts, or our president doesn't like the facts, or I don't like the facts. Facts are facts. His inauguration crowd size was not the same as Barack Obama. It just wasn't. And that started all of this. What I believe is what I believe. And it's dangerous, because I talk to voters all across the country. And that's what they say. My own mother, you're not putting this anywhere, are you? No. This is just for internal purposes?
It'll be on one of the publications. Do you want me to?
That's fine. My own mother, I love you, Mom. My own mother will say things to me, and she'll say, well, I believe that. I believe that he's going to do this. And I'm like, what evidence do you have to back that up? Like, that's just a belief. And so I call her every night on the way home. We have like a half-hour talk, because I'm the only one of the 5 siblings who don't live in Newton, so I want to make sure I'm in her life every day. And we talk about politics, and I say, Mom, I get why you say that, but people just believe what they believe is the truth. And that's not the case. It's not the case. Yeah. And that's what you fight against in journalism now. And if you do it right, and you don't give anybody any reason to call you slanted one way or the other, then you still have, I got someone who follows me on Twitter, the handle is Conservative Values. And I tweeted something from the primary, and this is the last thing I say, because and he tweeted back something like, I watched at Phil Lipof in New York, I've been watching him in Boston, and I can tell you whatever he's saying is the truth. He's a reporter who does it right down the middle. This is a guy who says conservative values, and if you look at his Twitter account, woo, some of the things he says. So I like pinned it at the top, and I like showed all my friends in the business. I'm like, this is the, and I said to him, I wrote him back and said, that's the best compliment you can give a journalist. Yeah. Say anything else you want to me, I'm gonna save that and look at it often, because that's the job.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Hope I helped out in some way. Thanks for having me.
That was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love what I do, so I could talk about it all day long.
Awesome.